Astrotometry log. It is March 11th, 2010. It's approximately 0706 UTC at the time of this recording. And before I get into the reason for the cancellation of the last forecast, I want to make it very clear that this is bleeding edge science. This is something that is being formulated basically in real time. I'm logging my thoughts here on Astrotometry. And so take everything that you see here in that context. This is not something that is ready yet for the use as emergency management. Now, there is a strong correlation between the earthquakes and the coronal holes that has been more or less established scientifically in other areas of research. But this is something that is not yet ready for use. And so the Bar Caroller writes, I can't understand why you canceled this watch. Based on planetary alignments alone, we will see a huge event March 15th, which was in line with your original theory. There will also be another event, not as significant, but still of high magnitude on March 21st, based on my analysis. Sounds like someone whispered in your ear, cancel this vid. Well, no, actually that's not what happened. I had received a very, very interesting data nugget from a groovy chick, and she sent me a magnetogram in the 17 gigahertz range, one frame every 10 minutes, that is put together is by the Nobuyama Radio Observatory in Japan, and it had a very interesting signature in the propagation of this waveform. And I was noticing how the interference up here is reflected down here in the other part, on the other part of the sun. And there's a whole nother field of solar physics called helioseismology that hasn't really worked with that implications on Earth changes as far as I'm aware yet, but that studies these patterns of movement on the surface of the solar sphere. And so while I was thinking about this, I thought about the fact that the SOHO data before the 2004 tsunami was missing. And I thought, well, what about the data after that? Because I could look at the data after the tsunami and see if there was one of these sort of shadows that existed as a standing waveform in the form of the magnetic filament. And so I did that. And if you'll recall from the last forecast, I was basing the location of the forecast on one of these magnetic filaments. Now, this is the filament that I believe was hypersymmetric with the tsunami in Chile. This was on the 24th. Several days later, we had the earthquake and tsunami in Chile. And this form recurred. This form that I believe was associated with the tsunami recurred on the 9th of March in the northern hemisphere. Now, when I first saw this, I didn't realize that this was very, very possibly the return of the wave, the return of this feature shadowed in time in the other direction. And so the theory now is that this was the wave coming towards the Earth, and the tsunami happened and then traveled back to the sun, propagating through the interplanetary magnetic field, and returned in the form of this. And so this is now theorized to be the return of that disturbance back through time-space. And so the coronal hole that was associated with it is also now theorized to be a return feature, not the coming feature, but the going feature. And so this sorts out one of the more difficult problems with using the coronal hole as an analysis. This paper that was produced by the Research Center for Earth Operative Monitoring concluded that 83% of the earthquake events they studied out of the 606 earthquake events were correlated with the coronal hole in in the way that they describe here in this paper. Now, one of the problems has been sorting out the holes that were associated with quakes and the ones that aren't. And so I think that this explains how the propagation occurs. In astrotometry, the ends of the waveforms that move through the magnetic sheet are actually connected. And so the current sheet is a sort of illusion that's created by the Earth's movement through time. And so there's a hypersymmetry that's not being treated in the current model. And so you get a propagation out, it comes back through the other wave and goes back in. And so this part of the puzzle hasn't been put together in the modern worldview yet. And so there's a hypersymmetry that exists beneath the level of the photon spin entanglement that hasn't been integrated into the model. Now, this is highly speculative again, and there have been several fairly significant quakes in California in the past couple of weeks. One of the issues that has to be resolved still is when one of these features does return, is there actually a strict causal relationship, or is it a tendency? And so it's unclear at this point whether there's a tendency or if it's a strict causal relationship. And clearly the other field play, the other interactions among the interplanetary magnetic field from the other solar features that would be influencing the return of the waveform will also have to be calculated in, will have to be assessed in the more active solar periods. In the more active solar periods, this model is going to have to be significantly enhanced in order to compensate for additional solar activity that causes interference in the patterns as they propagate through the field. So that's the latest thinking on this, and thanks for your support, and thanks for watching.